change in the fundraising sector has never been greater. But innovations in technology are evolving faster than our ability to understand them. Are these advances good or bad? Do they have unintended consequences? And what is the application to the global fundraising sector? That's what we're here to find out. Welcome to the Fundraising AI Podcast, your up-to-date resource for responsible AI for the global fundraising community, hosted by Nathan Chappell and Scott Rosenkrantz.
Hey everyone, we're back for another episode of the Fundraising AI Podcast. I am Nathan Chappell, and I'm here with my co-host and AI superpower, Scott Rosenkrantz. How you doing, Scott?
Good. Now that I'm called an AI superpower, I'm doing great.
That's all it takes.
That's all it takes.
That's all it takes.
I just like nicknames of any kind.
There you go. Well, we'll come up with plenty more. We have another retreat coming up here soon, and so we'll fulfill your wish here. So we've got a lot to talk about this week. So we 2025, I think, pretty strong last week with just a plethora of AI things. We have no sign of things slowing down over the next year. I think that AI is going to continue on strong. It is not a fad. It's here to stay. According to Jeff Bezos, it's a horizontal layer that goes on top of everything and everything they do at Amazon, and it's in everything and all that they're focused on. So, I think this week we talk about some of the latest things that have happened with AI over the last couple of days. One being the inauguration, which I thought absolutely fascinating to watch. And we won't get into a political conversation here, but I do think that if anyone is curious about where power and what priority AI and big data is, all you have to do is look at the players that were at the inauguration. We can talk about what that means for AI safety, and a lot of we don't know yet, but where does AI safety fall in that? And then there's a couple updated job reports. You had found the latest World Economic Forum report on jobs. I think there's a lot of really good, tidbits in there that we should talk through and I think help people feel better about their role. And then, of course, I'll be the wet blanket, talk about the LinkedIn jobs report and how it's not a sure thing, but what it does mean is that there's a lot of opportunity for people who are willing to learn and grow and expand their horizons. And then I want to round out our conversation today on something that I've been personally struggling with. It's this idea of AI disillusionment, which fully expected, but is AI smart or dumb? And I wish we had like a rating system for all the different things that we're doing, because in my head, every time I do something in ChatGPT and it's like really good, I'm like, that was smart. And then every time I ask Alexa something, I was like, that's dumb. So let's talk about some of those. I know you and I have these, kind of banters back and forth almost every day about, is AI smart or dumb? And what does that mean for where we're at in the sector? And then I want to lay out a plan for the future and how we want to structure the podcast to really dissect chapter by chapter our new book, Nonprofit AI, that is going to really, I think, drive a lot of change in our sector and allow people to get over that unstuckness. If you're stuck in where to apply AI or how do I apply AI in your nonprofit organization, we are going to provide that roadmap for you over the next year. What do you think?
Sounds good. Let's dive in.
All right. So all the way back to the beginning, I don't know if you watched the inauguration. I only got glimpses of it. I was actually far more interested in the Notre Dame National Championship, which they lost. But, as a Golden Domer myself, I was keenly excited about that. So that was pretty much all I thought about all weekend. They lost, but you know what? I think we're off to the right path here. The inauguration, though, so interesting. Did you watch it at all, or did you just get glimpses of it as well?
I didn't watch it. I read about it. I talked to you about it and saw what was going on there.
Yeah. In fact, there was a political cartoon this morning, which it literally visualized what was going on in my head last night, which was President Trump's inauguration. And they just kind of like scan the room and they show the people that are there. And, coming from this time when AI, quote unquote, was a fad back in, say, 2017, you and I were working in AI. People were like, you're dumb. That's just not something that touches everyone. So at the inauguration, among a much bigger list of other people were Elon Musk, of course, because he now has an office inside the White House. Which I don't know if people know that, running the new Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, which is hilarious because he loves a good fun or whatever meme. Yeah, he loves a good meme. He's like the actually human meme creator. So Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos from Amazon, Mark Zuckerberg from Meta, Sundar Pichai from Google, Tim Cook from Apple, So Z from TikTok, which hilarious, given everything else going on
Right.
with that. Sam Altman, of course, who's been briefing the White House apparently every week. We'll talk about it later and some new developments in AI. And I don't know how to pronounce her last name, Dara Khosrowshahi from Uber. And so all this to say is that if you think AI is not top of mind for the government and or the country's safety or security at large, you are vastly mistaken. Just by show of hands, and the people that were in this room who were there either have been on opposing sides or supportive sides, all showed up because this is essentially where power in our country lies. And most people would agree at this point that the future essentially rulers of the world, if you will, and that comes from a book from Kai-Fu Lee that was talking about AI superpowers. And the book is called AI Superpowers from several years ago, before modern AI, essentially, and talking about whoever controls AI controls the world. And I think there's enough there that this has clearly gotten the attention, and not just in money, but in power, that it was just this incredible display of force. And I'm like, wow, that was pretty awesome, but also horrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. The next 4 years are going to be interesting for, I mean, that whole group, right? There are a couple people that are missing, at least from being called out, right? Microsoft maybe wasn't there. NVIDIA maybe wasn't there, or at least wasn't highlighted. But those are key players in this space. And then follow that up with, you already mentioned it, but Donald Trump rescinded Joe Biden's act on establishing safety guidelines for AI. So
Right.
he has all these people right next to him, and then he's cutting out any guardrails essentially to make sure that when it's applied and put forth, that it's done so in a responsible way.
Yeah. And what's so crazy about the blueprint for responsible AI that was outlined, what, a year ago, 2 years ago? One, it was never enforced, right? So it was basically a blueprint. What was more crazy about that is that it was the same tech people that proposed that and actually drafted that for Biden. And so, any, I guess, if you will, any glimpse of legislation or regulation around AI is basically going to get rebooted, and very intentionally, because there is a philosophy in the US, so people wonder why. There's a philosophy that, any type of regulation will slow down, R&D and discovery, and that, essentially at that point, the US loses, quote unquote, the AI arms race. So there's a lot of intentionality around why we're not regulating, but at the same time, it's kind of silly to even pretend to try to regulate a technology that is basically adaptive, right? So by the time even the blueprint for responsible AI came out, AI had advanced 1,000x since then. There's no word, like, just by talking about agentic AI or agent of AI, there was no reference of that, right? So they weren't even,
Right.
Even a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, when they're starting to write legislation, it takes years and years and years to go through. They're barely just beginning to spell the words AI and actually even come up with a common definition. And you and I know that from the Insights Committee. It took them 4 years to basically, from the ISO Council, some of the smartest people in the US and around the world, 4 years to agree on a definition of what AI was, let alone how you're going to regulate it. So I'm not surprised that it was overturned. The executive order was overturned because it probably wasn't sufficient anyway. But it's going to be really interesting. I mean, with that show of force, what is the future of AI, regulation going to look like, and what is the role of the nonprofit sector if that's the case?
Yeah. So what do you expect to happen in rest of the term? Do you think that more regulation is going to come out, or do you think it's going to be open-ended, free for all, because that's what's best for business?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell. I think there's going to have to be some regulation, but probably it will be pending something really bad happening first. So it'd be, something related to, dark net, or something where it's like people, stolen identities and things like that. I don't see a lot of legislation coming in the next 4 years. I think the arms race is real, at least in their eyes. The arms race is real about advancing AI and compute power and energy. But at the same time, we have Elon and Trump at the helm in that regard. And Elon is always 10 steps ahead of anyone else in terms of like, how does this connect to this? And so there's this, very big master plan. At the same time, we're collecting lots of data. I think this goes back to, drawing this all the way back to the nonprofit sector, something that you and I became very clear about several years ago, that this idea of that those people that we just named and lots of others were there because it's in their best interest from a financial perspective. The stock market will reward them because they were there and it looks like they're in good graces, whether they are or not in the present, doesn't matter. That, they are going to continue to scale their corporations because that essentially is what keeps them in business and keeps them growing. We don't have to go that far back to remember when Sam Altman was fired over the use of safety, or the lack thereof, at OpenAI, was fired and then rehired after a coup because Microsoft owns whatever it is, 49 or 51%. And, there were a lot of incentives for him to come back. So all this to tie the bow on means that one is that responsible AI, as defined by X and Amazon and Microsoft and Google, are by definition serving their best interests, and Apple and all the others, not ours. I think because of their financial incentives, that will always be the case. We live in a capitalistic society, at least for now. And that means that the shareholders are going to reward scale over safety. That's just the pure economics of it. It also means that by what we feel like is a weakness in the nonprofit sector, the lack of financial incentives, which some people may think of us as being slow or unagile. I don't know what the right word is for that. Not as quickly pivoting as other sectors, but adaptive. That actually ends up being our superpower. That the lack of financial incentives at the nonprofit sector allows us to have complete clarity about what responsible is. And that's where, you and I spent lots and lots of time. We created the first framework for responsible AI that we released. I don't know what year that was, a couple of years ago, right? Been like 3 years?
Yeah, I think we're going on because it's going to be the third summit. So yeah.
Yeah. So like 3.5 years ago, we created this open source framework for responsible AI, and then took it to a new level, not just responsible AI from an ethical perspective, but beneficial AI that served not just short-term interests, but long-term interests and mitigated long-term consequences and unintended consequences. So all that to say is that I feel like now more than ever, seeing that display of power and the number of people and basically who's in whose pocket, like whatever you want to call it, and it's not a political statement, it's just the nature of a capitalistic society, is that the nonprofit sector has this now opportunity, but honestly, clarity, by lack of those same financial incentives, to lead the world in truly what responsible and beneficial AI is. Of course, that all comes down to how much faith do we have in the human race to do the right thing. That would be a separate, not even another day for a podcast, but probably an entirely different type of podcast where we could debate the merits of how much faith do we have in the human race. But I do think that now more than ever, given what you shared about the overturning of Biden's executive order on day one, to just essentially who's in the room and is going to continue to drive the agenda for the next 4 years. I mean, there's not billions at stake. There's trillions of current and mega trillions of future dollars at stake in whoever, leads this. And along with that power, of course, that our sector can sit and pause and then shape, I think, the narrative that is going to at least protect the most vulnerable, that will reinforce the importance of trust within, from donors to nonprofits, and therefore I think probably create the architecture for what I think inevitably will be, after crap hits the fan, how people evaluate good versus bad AI, the same way we do now by looking at good versus bad social media.
And I think now more than ever, I mean, with all these pieces coming together, again, the people in the room, the day one rejection of previous regulation, 2025 is shaping up to be a very fast growth for AI. I mean, faster than probably what we've seen over the past few years. I know that's how exponential growth works anyway, but all the pieces are just lining up that we're going to see things that we've never seen before. And so even more of a need for us to have this conversation and for us to try to identify good, bad, beneficial, victimizing, whatever it is, and help people differentiate between how you should use it, should you use it, what do you need to be looking out for, and just making sure that everybody's kind of aware of the current state.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think, working on a new keynote, which I told you before, that it really is, and it was coming clear to me this last week, is that we almost have to create a habitual behavior that every day we wake up and we decide before we use something, we have this trigger in our head that questions, just because I can do this doesn't mean I should, right? And we just have to build this and program this into our daily lives, because the lure of using all the tools is very, very strong. The convenience of using the tools is very, very strong. The even probably financial and job incentives for using the tools very, very strong. But we come down to the question of like, is this beneficial, for me in the short term? Is it beneficial for me in the long term? Is it beneficial for humanity in the short term? Is it beneficial for humanity in the long term? And I think if you can honestly answer those four questions and be like, yes, 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 move forward. There's tons of this technology that can get a yes answer on all four of those domains. But there's also the few occasions where you're like, this technology can do something that violates my personal protocols and my personal values, and probably will have some unintended consequences or detrimental consequences on humanity in the future that I don't want to be a part of. And I think only pausing and questioning that is, I think, what will differentiate our sector versus the private sector, which by definition will have to continue to move forward because the the arms race around AI is around scale over safety. That's what's going to be rewarded. I also think it's super interesting as we kind of segue into jobs, right? We're just already talking about how different that landscape looks. LinkedIn came out with their annual jobs report last week, and all the typical stuff of like whatever percentage of jobs that are the most sought after now didn't exist 5 years ago. Like just, just a very adaptive, fast moving time. But one of the data points was that 70% of skills used in most jobs today will change by 2030. I mean, 70%. So basically 2/3 of jobs, or more than 2/3 of jobs, right? Almost 3/4 of the jobs out there are going to require different skills in 5, 6 years, like not a long time. And that's just showing kind of the power and enormous kind of gravity that AI is, that kind of sits on top of all things. It also means if you're a person who does not want to learn, doesn't want to be curious, like you're going to have a really hard time over the next 5 years. And then, of course, there's some good news with that, the World Economic Forum jobs report came out. So why don't you share that? Because I think the glass half full side of that really kind of shone through in that report, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just kind of going back to what you were saying, I wonder when the computers came out, when internet came out, what the shift was over a 5 year span, right? Because everything went from analog to digital. It was that close to 70% of the skills that you needed, you had to reimagine once the computer came out.
I mean, the difference is that gestation period was much, much longer,
Right.
right? So
Right.
when we're talking about modern
The
AI, we're
adoption
talking
of
2 years,
general
and then
computers.
yeah, the adoption of personal computers was so
Right.
slow and drawn out because they're just insanely expensive, and actually not very functional at the beginning. Whereas, like, I think GPT 3.5 comes out and it's like we laugh at it now, but holy crap, like it's insane. It was like showing up in the fifth evolution of a personal computer, and also different with no barriers, right? Essentially free. And so first the technology became completely democratized from day one.
So are there these spikes of, all right, 70% of the skills shifted, but maybe instead of a 5 year window, it's a 10 or 15, and then things kind of plateau for a while until new technology comes out. And now we're just seeing it in a very quick turnaround of just 5 years.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think anyone's willing to go past 5 years now to project
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
I mean, we're looking at 2033. About 2033 is projected to be the year of quantum supremacy, essentially. So then I think that's when all bets are off on everything.
Hmm.
So the furthest prediction I think we'll see is 2030. But yeah, I think to your point, of course, it's not linear and not all jobs are
Hmm.
created equal. And so I never thought I was going to go to Home Depot and find that 80% of the cashier lines are self checkout, right?
Yeah.
Or at an airport, I wouldn't actually wait in line to like get my Wrigley gum. I would just go up to a scanner and just do it myself. I mean, already we're seeing a lot of jobs change and displaced because of that. But I think the biggest ones in the short term are going to be around anything rules based, right?
Mhm.
AI is really good at anything rules based, and that includes lots of any basic programming. If you
Mhm.
don't have real world experience and you're a programmer, that's a job that, I mean, honestly, like if I was working on my keynote, ChatGPT is helping me. I had like this whole list of notes, it distills it down. And I say, can you output that for me in a Word document? I'm sure you've seen this a million times, but you can click on the little link next to it. And it's essentially writing Python code that is essentially telling it's writing code to say, take all this information, put it into this format, put the headers in blue, put the colors in black, and output it into this format. And it's like,
Mhm.
oh, by the way, I could do the same thing in a PowerPoint. And it just writes code on the fly. That was unfathomable, right? I
Yeah.
mean, how long it will what was it, a year ago that you were having to use Code Interpreter and then essentially a plugin in PowerPoint to import a code that you had developed in through Code Interpreter. So those jobs are first to go. So you have to learn how to bring added value to an organization, not just write simple code like Python, but everyone's a programmer. But then I think other jobs, like, I don't know what your feelings are, like a counselor, like how in 5 years is a marital counselor using AI to improve their outcomes with their patients? I mean,
Yeah.
probably a little slower, but probably pretty profoundly, right?
Yeah. I imagine that industry is going to get impacted significantly in that 5-year window, right? Maybe later to make such a drastic change. But I mean, again, I started in the psychology field, and I've often thought about building a GPT to take a certain modality of therapy. Not going to be perfect, but it's not going to be far off, and it's going to be $20 a month as opposed to $200 an hour.
Well, I mean, Ethan Mollick, goes into that in Co-Intelligence in his book. And it's just that if you're going to argue with an AI, it's 87% more likely to have you take its point of view because it knows all the techniques of convincing you to take action, right? And so there's a lot of areas in therapy. I think about this in fundraising, right? I mean, we have a lot of soft starts in this of saying, hey, I'm researching prospects, and I would spend, I mean, traditionally a couple hours per person to to help me analyze all this data. I have like 1,000 data points on this person, and there's all these news articles, and I can't make sense of it all. I'm going to spend, don't bother me for 4 days or something, something ridiculous. Like, don't bother me because it's just I need a lot of time to just concentrate and get this right. I mean, it's absurd, right? Because now you're like, take all this data, synthesize it for me, fact check it, double check it, check yourself. And so create a recursive workflow to make sure that, the AI is as accurate as possible, and do it in, 4 bullet points in a paragraph that I can give, and also do it in a PowerPoint, whatever you want. And so there's jobs like that in nonprofit that are changing dramatically today because the technology is right fitted for it. And then other jobs that require, in my opinion, a lot more soft skills, like actual frontline fundraising, that will be enhanced and augmented by AI, by the things we just mentioned, and coming up with creative ways to engage or to get better at communicating with the donor and give me ideas on how to get through and talk about their grandkids or whatever it might be. But I do think that 70% of job skills are going to change by 2030. That is, I don't think there's any exception there for the nonprofit sector. I think that is straight in, that 70% of nonprofit jobs are going to change their skill set in the next 5 years.
Yeah. So getting to, because that's the LinkedIn report, the World Economic Forum, continuing about this job displacement, it says that 92 million jobs will be displaced. I'm not sure the next number of years. I think also within a 5-year window. But for every one job that's going to be displaced, almost 2 jobs will be created. So 170 million jobs will be created. So there, just like we saw again with computers, computer technicians was a job that obviously didn't exist before, right? But the toll booth operator got replaced, right? So we'll see this shift where new roles are coming out. Again, thank God that prompt engineer has gone away for all intents and purposes. But we'll see new roles coming out of people being that AI translator, AI whisperer, trying to figure out how to get better outputs from it or how to interpret what is coming from the AI. And then the skills that they're saying are going to be most important for that evolution: creative thinking, resilience, flexibility, agility, curiosity, and lifelong learning. If you have those, you're going to be set, right? You're not going to get stuck in your ways. You're not going to be in the 92 million that get displaced, but you're going to see opportunities as they open up and evolve and kind of point yourself in that direction.
Yeah. And I did check, it is the next 5 years also. So they're kind of correlating with the LinkedIn report. So the next 5 years, 70% of job skills will change. And also to this report, and we'll put a link to this report in the show notes, but 170 million jobs created, 92 million jobs displaced. So the net increase is actually pretty significant if you're willing to do those things. And I think those things are just not things that are nice to have. Those are essential elements to succeed. And that, I mean, 100% true for anyone in the nonprofit sector is, the recipe is there. And, at least for what we know it to be today. I mean, a few years ago, we thought the differential was around creativity and empathy, or strategy, creativity, and empathy. And now AI has actually gotten pretty good at some of those things. But I mean, I love those points. So we need to really hit home on, the need to remain relevant in an exponential age. So I think, thanks for sharing that, because I think there's a ray of hope there for sure. I think a lot of people are on the doomsdayer side of it, which, at least for the next 5 years, it looks like there's a lot of opportunity for those that want to really lean in and, practice what it means to be adaptive.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can build those skills, right? And again, we've talked many times about a culture of curiosity or creativity
Yeah.
and collaboration, right? Getting together with other individuals and just kind of building ideas off each other. So even if you don't feel like those skill sets speak to you where you are now, it doesn't mean that you can't get there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm a dog on a bone with the whole curiosity mindset. I think it's just such an easy but profound way to set yourself and your organization apart is just to incentivize and reward people for asking questions and being curious. I think that's winners take all. So let's end this out with honestly something that I just can't help with. Anytime I evaluate any technology is around this idea is AI smart or dumb. And I feel like I need this like live rating system. If I had Google Glasses or something, it would be like, I would just do that and be like thumbs up or thumbs down. So there's this report that comes out that Sam Altman is briefing the government again. I mean, apparently he's briefing the government a lot. And by the way, there's so much continued weird stuff that goes on with that whole organization, and mainly the lawsuit with his sister, and then this report of this. I don't even want to get into it. It's just like we're just going to get the popcorn and
that's
see.
Another podcast altogether, too.
100%. Let Joe Rogan take that one. Actually, I think he already has. Tucker Carlson did for sure. Is AI smart or dumb? So Sam Altman's briefing the government on what is considered super agents. And so we've moved from, augmented general intelligence, AGI, to basically super intelligence, which is admittedly 2 weeks ago or so, Sam Altman said, look, the path to AGI is very clear. In fact, it made it sound like we're already there. And we're changing the goalposts. So we're no longer going for AGI because AI can increasingly and pretty consistently convince people that it's human. And that's kind of the test of AGI. And we're moving to super intelligence, which means that essentially it's an AI that's smarter than everybody at everything. And with that comes this new world of agents. So it's not just about being smart, it's about being able to take and create activity, right? And actually get stuff done. And so this new thing is called super agents. And so Sam Altman's briefing the government on super agents, which are expected to possess PhD level reasoning capabilities, marking a significant leap in AI. That advanced AI systems are designed to perform complex tasks independently, potentially revolutionizing many industries and job markets. So here are the 4 things that these super agents can do. Execute intricate multi-step tasks without human intervention, demonstrating advanced problem-solving skills comparable to highly educated humans, PhD level, adapting better to new situations and learning from experience, and potentially replacing human workers in knowledge-intensive fields. So what is the role of a PhD student, really, or a PhD, if it's just sitting around thinking about these big ideas, and this AI can actually do it better and learn from itself and take action on that even in microseconds versus 4 years or 6 years. So we say this because we talk about AI being smart, but then we have things like OpenAI released tasks last week, 2 weeks ago, or a week ago. And task is this new thing where it's like, I can go into ChatGPT and be like, hey, can you remind me that, or you and I both did this. We didn't even talk about this. We both did the same thing where like the day one, we're like, can you create a task where you send me the latest AI news every single day, to my inbox? And it missed like the first day or whatever, it was brand new. But then I told you, I got this task that it said, hey, it's a task, ChatGPT task, time to watch the Notre Dame game. The problem with that, or 2 problems with that. One is I never gave it that task. And actually, I don't even really remember talking about Notre Dame. So that's kind of weird. But it never gave it that task. But it also gave it to me on Saturday. And the game was on Monday. And so I'm like, AI is so dumb. Like, how did it? And when I asked chat, I'm like, how did you get this task? Like, why are you sending me this? And it says, I'm sorry, I don't have a record of you ever giving me this task. And I'm like, no kidding, because I never did. And then, by the way, why are you telling me this on Saturday? The game's on Monday. And it's like, I'm sorry, there must be some confusion. I'm like, yeah, obviously. So all that to say, while we're talking on one hand about, Sam Altman advising the government on these PhD super agents that are working and learning autonomously, on the reality of the disillusionment side that we're on as end users sometimes is just like, what's going on here? This is like the dumbest AI has ever been. And we know that it's like basically like a teenager and it's just going to get better. Now, what's your take on all that?
Whenever there's this binary question, I often go back to when we had our conversation with Mallory. Is AI good or bad? And it's neither, right? It's both, right? Like, it's really smart at some things, much smarter than I am, and really dumb at other things, like telling you, or actually, wait, was it smart? Was it giving you maybe a couple day reminder before the game to make sure that you had cleared off your calendar so that you could watch the game without being asked? That could be smart, right? I mean, we could go a couple different ways here, but there are times that I still get incredibly frustrated. Like I've been putting together a presentation, asking it to create visualizations, and when it knows that I'm doing it for a presentation, 9 times out of 10, that image will show a presenter in front of a screen with the image that I told it to create. I'm trying to have it take that out, but it still keeps putting it in. So like it doesn't get exactly what I want it to, no matter how clear I think I am. But then it also puts together these things far superior to what I will be able to do in a short period of time. So maybe it's not that it's smarter or dumber than us, but it's just quicker than us, right? And I could do, if I give it enough time, I could do the same thing, but hours instead of 40
And
seconds.
I joke about this a lot because AI is really, really smart. I mean, it's smart at the things that are hard, like, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like Apple, just actually stopped their whole AI summarization thing where on their news report. So they were summarizing the news article with AI so you get a glimpse, and finding out that it was really not good. And actually it was misstating things or leaving things out or making things sound as if. And so there's a lot of work to do on that side. But I will tell you, the things that are near impossible to me, like, I mean, I kid you not, because I kind of wake up thinking about this stuff, and I have this like running list of like ideas in my head of AI this or not this, or it's like this, or what, explore this. And this running list is like 4 pages long. And I took that entire list, didn't even look at it, didn't clean it up, typos and all. And I said, can you synthesize this into a keynote for me? And it needs to be a keynote that is a macro view, but also has practical application to it. And I was just blown away. Like, probably wouldn't have done it. And if I did it, it probably would have been about 20% as good as what it provided me. So I think it's really good at the things that we're not even really capable of doing, like analyzing this really big report or something, or even correlating analogies in a book. It's just like there's so much in our head, and our ability to retain is so finite, yet AI is not infinite, but appears to be infinite when it's doing those types of things. So it's the little things that actually get me to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm dealing with this. And probably because I'm comparing about how smart it is on other things.
Yeah, how it surpasses all these tasks and against benchmarks, insane, right? And this AI super agents that you're talking about, expected to possess PhD level reasoning, right? We might know someone who has 1 PhD. I don't know many people who have 2 PhDs, but this would have a PhD across disciplines. And
Right,
so
all the
what this can
PhDs.
synthesize cannot be synthesized by any person in the world. So I think I mean, you say it often, the dumbest AI that you're ever going to use is today's, right? And every day it's going to get smarter. Maybe it will start clearing out your calendar and putting the Notre Dame game on proactively, intentionally, right? Knowing that that's where you want to be.
Right. In fairness, like, that was the first day it came out, right? And so they need that data and they need that feedback to fix those things. I think, in the nonprofit sector, you and I spend much less time now convincing people that AI is not a fad. But I do think there are a lot of people out there that use inaccuracies or these little nuances as reasons or rationale not to move forward using AI. And to your point, you have a domain expert, whether it's PhD or not, when you're using whatever gen tool you're using. You have an extremely intelligent support system, if you don't want to call it a helper or an assistant, but a support agent that knows your work and what you're trying to do far better than you think it does. And frankly, not using it, and I shared this last week with a group at Salvation Army, that not using it in the future, mark my words, I shared this like 4 years ago, will seem irresponsible by donors in the future. The same way if your organization said, I'm not going to use the internet because the internet is inaccurate and, it's got bad stuff on it as well. We know that donors would opt out of giving to your charity because essentially they're going to look at you and be like, you're nuts. Like, I'm not going to give to an organization that is only using Rolodexes and Post-it notes. And so all that to say is that, this has to be less and less of an excuse of why you're not moving forward. And you need to understand this is an evolution. The worst AI you'll ever use is today, that tomorrow, the next day, and the next day, not just incrementally better, but we're talking like light speed better, in short periods of time, where we can end on my favorite weekend use case of AI was something I woke you up with this morning, probably with a voice memo that was turned into a video. Did you like that?
Yeah, that was good. Changed how I want to receive any message from here on out.
Especially first thing in the morning, right?
Yeah.
It's like you having your coffee. I don't want to hear you drone on in voicemail or voice memo. So there's an app called Typo, Typpo, and it's super fun just to play with it. If you have a voice memo, pretty sure that your data is not secure. So that this voice memo is like 99.9% sure. So just do whatever you want, but don't share anything confidential, probably with that. But you can speak to it. It records it. It actually transcribes it. So you can see it transcribe it while you're speaking. And then it actually creates it into a video. And there's like, I don't know, 20 or 30 different templates you can use. It's super cool. It's like super fun. I don't want to do it every day, but it's fun if you want to just convey, hey, I'm thinking about you and I hope you have a great day. You mean a lot to me, or happy birthday, whatever. I mean, might be a cool thing to like communicate something to a donor with like a lot of pretty flowers and just like, hey, I just was thinking about you today and I just want you to have a great day and that you're important to, me and our organization. So that's our AI app tip for the day, typpo.app. And you could download it there.
Yeah. If you send me another voice memo that isn't using Typo, I'm just not even going to listen to it.
Well, I sent it to Mallory Erickson because she's notoriously known for sending extremely long. Like you actually have to like put time on your calendar to listen to her voice memos because she just like goes on, and we like make fun of her all the time. I'm like, this is actually something that like could change that. I'll actually listen to these because now I could actually visually stimulate my brain while I'm listening to you drone on about something. So love you, Mallory. All right, Scott, we covered a lot. We covered from the macro, we covered the future, we covered the present. I don't know. Is there anything that we missed?
I don't think we missed anything. I think we covered all that there is to cover. And if we missed it, we'll cover it next week's episode.
The good news is it'll be totally different next week.
Right.
So, which is why we don't have to worry about what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's been great chatting with you. Always to sync up on this stuff. Hope if you're listening, hope you're enjoying the journey that's along with us. We're going to be on the road a lot this year. We're going to see a lot of you in person. So hope to connect with you in person. If you have other ideas for what we should include or not include on this podcast, let us know. And like I said earlier, we are going to actually be dissecting our book, Nonprofit AI, and then carving out chapter by chapter throughout the year, essentially how we're viewing AI used in pretty much every job function within the nonprofit world. So from, mission evaluation to communications to HR to fundraising, donor experience, and so on and so on. We're going to break those out for you and share some of our thoughts on, what are the appropriate applications and some of the pitfalls along the way and things to be mindful of.
Yeah. And we'll be doing a little bit of a roadshow with the podcast and the book at different conferences. So we'll get those dates out on the website, maybe this episode, and we can see who shows up, and love to meet you.
All right. Well, take care, everyone. Keep on doing the hard work, and we'll talk to you soon.
Great. Thanks all.